Welcome to Talent Unfiltered, located at the intersection of innovation and all things talent. Talent Unfiltered is presented by Intelligent and by HireWorks. HireWorks, talent forward. Now, here is your host, Ron Gaudier.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Talent Unfiltered, presented by Intelligent and by HireWorks. I am Ron Gaudier, coming to you from Chicago as usual. Spring is in the air here. It's an absolutely beautiful day. That said, I also know we have gotten snow here late in April and in early May, but I still remain cautiously optimistic that winter is behind us. Our guest today is also a Chicago native. He is Elliott Garms, founder of humanpredictions.io, and he joins us to discuss his take on the current and future states of recruiting and how recruiters can become more effective in their messaging campaigns each and every day. But before we get rolling, you are probably noticing, if you've watched this show before, some changes in our studio, our channel, and our social media feeds. And this is all part of bringing the show underneath the Intelligent umbrella. And if you're not familiar, Intelligent is our new digital magazine and online community that is focused on helping solve the talent equation. We have an absolutely incredible set of contributors and writers who have lent their talents to this, and that includes people like Lou Adler, Craig Fisher, Mark Tortorisi, Dr. Tanja Coleman, and so many more. And these folks are taking time to share their thoughts on how the act of acquiring talent can be better for everyone, and that's candidates and companies alike. So check it out, intelligent.com. That's INTALEGENT.com. And when you're there, drop us a line. Let us know what kind of content you would like to see on the site, and we'll do our best to accommodate you. Again, that's intelligent.com. We also have new social media for the show and for Intelligent, which I will share in the comments section below. I want to remind you that this show is available on Spotify, on Buzzsprout, SoundCloud, and there is a video version, which some of you are watching right now on YouTube. If you like what we do, if you dig it, then grab that subscribe button and hit like, and then share this with anybody that you think might get some type of benefit out of what we do here or at intelligent.com. All right, let's get to it. Our guest today is Elliott Garms. He is the co-founder of humanpredictions.io, which is a very unique platform that strives to predict when technical talent might be ready for the next step in their career journey. He's also a contributor at intelligent.com. Hey, Elliot, welcome into Talent Unfiltered today, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Ron. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited because I've had the opportunity to get to know you a little bit over the last 4 or 5 years, and I've always been impressed just kind of not only about what you were doing at Human Predictions, but also just your background in recruiting and your understanding of talent and how to be a human in the context of trying to sell a service to a client or to a candidate. And I want to get into that a little bit today. But before we get in this too far, tell us a little bit about Human Predictions and why you built the company and what you guys are actually trying to solve for.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, human predictions is really, I think the main problem we're addressing is that a lot of tech folks are moving away from LinkedIn. And, having been a tech recruiter my whole life, LinkedIn has always been the de facto place to go find passive talent, identify and have a way to reach out and connect with them. But over the last 5 years or so, and especially in the last year, we're just seeing more and more tech people disengage with LinkedIn. I joke it's LinkedIn's hit MySpace status for the tech industry, but a lot of what we're
That's
a,
funny.
a lot of what
That's
we're doing
funny.
at Human Predictions is just helping tap into public communities like GitHub or Stack Overflow and make that data more useful and actionable from a recruiting standpoint. So that we
And
could
it's
get into
it's
it more,
really
but from a high level, that's kind of the
well,
high
it's a
level.
fascinating. Yeah, it's a fascinating offering. I've had the good fortune to use it on a few different projects, and I think you've been really generous when I was on different product or projects, being able to let me kind of jump in there and touch the product a little bit and see how it works, and the ideas behind it are just fascinating, and I think the applications. I know you guys focus on technology recruiting at this point. But as a practitioner myself, I can see applications for this across so many other industries, and I'll be glad whisper when you finally make that jump. So, but thanks for things telling us about it, and anybody who's interested. You can go out to humanpredictions.io and check it out. It's just phenomenal. Elliot and his entire team are incredible. So kind of want to get into a little bit of what we had planned to talk about. You wrote an article that appeared on our website on intelligent.com, and in it, you talked about being human in terms of how you recruit and the approach that you take. And when you look at your LinkedIn page, that idea that you apply that humanistic characteristic or that approach really comes through in your endorsements. It comes through in other places in terms of like what you see you put out there in terms of content. Walk me through real quick. What are modern recruiters missing when it comes to being more human in their interactions with candidates?
It's a great question. I think, and it's ironic as someone who is the founder of a technology product for recruiting that my answer is I think a lot of times people over-index on technology. Recruiting at its core is a very human profession. You're helping people shift careers. In tech, these in many cases are very specialized, very high-paying careers. And it's a big deal. I mean, I think a friend of mine had said, job seekers essentially do the equivalent of research on changing careers as they do buying a new house. In terms of back checking, looking, doing research, and it's a huge life change. And so I think you got to be human. And with the rise of social media and email and all these tools, I think a lot of modern day recruiting practices have kind of done away with some of the more human elements of recruiting and focused heavily on email and lots of email and very transactional, spammy email. Um, and you can only get so far or get in touch with a certain type of person when you take that approach. And so, yeah, I think it uh, is definitely a profession where being human is important, and I think it's more of a lost art these days where you have people running campaigns and doing things much more transactionally than they used to be. And there's cool lifts you can see from technology, but if you're too all in on it, I think it could hurt you more than it helps you.
Yeah, I was having a conversation the other day, excuse me, with a good buddy who works in the recruitment marketing space, and he is a firm believer that uh, the more campaigns and the more awareness you have, the better off you are. And I agree with that in general, but I think it's kind of like chasing a dog chasing a car. What do you do when you actually catch one? How do you actually interact? What are the things that actually happen uh, uh, once you have captured that person, right? If you think about it from a digital marketing standpoint, because that's really where I think recruiting has moved to. There's an awareness level of the funnel, there's an engagement level of the funnel, and then there's a conversion level in that funnel, and that conversion requires that you be a true human being, authentic, real, and able to communicate in an honest, ethical way with the candidate you're dealing with. And I'd love to get your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think for tech recruiting, I think it goes upstream more and it really requires being human at the outreach stage. I think that's what we're seeing as the differentiator these days in tech recruiting is it's getting easier and easier to find the folks you need to recruit, but unless you're saying something meaningful, you're likely getting ignored. So I agree with you wholeheartedly that the further down the funnel, the more human you have to be. But I think tech is so competitive right now that tech people are inundated at the very top of funnel to the point that they're very numb to a lot of, very, templated mass email campaigns that aren't personalized, they aren't human. And I think we're seeing a point in the recruiting or in tech recruiting where if you're writing those generic, inhuman mass outreach templates, you're not going to see much engagement on it at all. So I think it again, it's where the kind of pendulum used to be all human stuff. The rise of technology, it's kind of swung heavily. But if you look at, some of the, there's a lot of now anti pixel, for a while it was email tracking tools, but now there's anti. And something I say to a lot of people I work with is like, very well every morning when you check your email what's real and what's not. Um, and again, I think
Yep,
we're
you
we're
do.
going into this new era where if you're just running transactional email campaigns, they're going to really start dipping in their effectiveness and their engagement. I think there's still a huge opportunity to use email software and run campaigns, but these mass non-personalized ones, everyone's numb to and no one's engaging with. So I think it's going even further up the upstream or more top of funnel where you need to be human there, not just once someone's engaged and you need to convert them to a hire.
Yeah, that's really that's a very astute observation because I do think over the course of time, technology brings positives and negatives, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But part of it is it becomes easier to disengage, and the more that you disengage, the harder it is to become human. I agree with you 100% that there is there's a set of people out there who are entirely dependent upon a couple of sources and particular types of programmatic email, or they get held up on this idea that I'm going to create as much content as I possibly can, and that way everybody will know I'm here. And then when they get to the other side of that equation and begin to actually have an interaction with a candidate, well, the content that they put out doesn't match the way they actually communicate or the way they actually talk. And I think you have to be, pretty cognizant of those things. We were talking just there about technology and the pluses and minuses. So I'd like you to put on your kind of your business leader hat. And when you think about technology and how it's changing the act of recruitment, what sticks out most in your mind in terms of the positive change that it's brought, but more importantly, the negative change that it inherently carries with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're more connected, we have more information at our fingertips. So I think the major change technology has had to recruiting, in my opinion, is recruiting 20 years ago was, who is in your internal database. If you're a company, it's who's applied, who do we know, and that's it. If you're a
Mhm.
recruiting agency, it's who have we worked with, who have we gotten resumes from. And so recruiting used to be heavily, skewed towards who you know and who you have access to and who you've worked with or interviewed. And that was really it. Whereas nowadays, recruiting is everyone's online for the most part. And, it's no longer about your private database. It's now everyone's working off the same database, which is the public internet, and who can be most efficient and effective with that. So I think overall it's great that we have more access to people we want to connect with, but it's created this problem that we were just talking about of a lot of abuse and just like people pretending to be human with these templates when they're not human or really reaching out to you at all. And I think it's been, a 15, 20-year journey of these email tools and kind of using technology to scale recruiting operations. But again, I think a lot of people have lost touch with the recruiting fundamentals of being someone with relationships in a particular niche, in a particular vertical, knowing, who the main companies are, who the main conferences are, who the speakers are, like to me, that's becoming a lost art in recruiting. Recruiting's like a lot of tool jockeys that are just, hey, can I load up campaigns? Can I, scrape data from here and plaster emails there? And again, that works to a certain degree, but I believe strongly that we're exiting the era of that working at all, and we're going into a new era where technology is going to be used to verify that it's not some BS template pretending to be genuine, but actually not at all. And it's going to start making it really hard for the people who have this approach of just, shooting off automated stuff, but don't have any relationships. I think it's going to be a lot harder for them in the coming years, and that we're going to get back to the point, and I think it's a candidate driven market. And so the candidates also don't want to work with a recruiter that doesn't know anything about their industry or profession, but just sends spam all day. A candidate does want to
Yep.
work with someone that knows all the best companies and can get you, in front of the right teams or interesting places you want to work. They could be a great partner, and that's valuable. So, anyways, long rant to your question, but I think
It's okay.
technology,
We like
like,
long rants here, man. That's it.
yeah, I mean, I think really what we talk a lot about at Human Predictions is there are certain things in the recruiting workflow, or in the kind of, what goes into world class recruiting. If you look at that, there are certain things in that
Hmm.
process that technology is better qualified to do over humans. But there's a lot of things in that process that technology is nowhere near qualified, ready to do. And things like building trust, or getting to know, like, what makes you, Ron, tick. Why would you move? Is it money? Is it you want to move somewhere else, and if I could find you something there, you jump. But really getting to know that. And I think, again, back to the point I've been making, is like, tech people don't want to engage with recruiters generally at all. But if you're like a robotic, blase outreach recruiter with nothing to say, like, you're going to have a very hard time getting anyone's attention.
And I think that's true though in every industry. I know that tech is highly competitive, but I think that recruiting in general, to your point, has taken a turn where we've allowed, and it really happened when job boards hit the market, that the act of recruiting changed because you knew you could go get more people. You knew you could go get someone else if someone didn't work out. You had easy access. And I think that made people not value the relationships that they had with candidates in the same way that they did when I first came up in the business. And I guess that kind of leads me into my next question. When you bring on new people in your company, and I know what I tell people when they, when I'm talking with a new recruiter or they're joining, me in our organization, um, what advice do you give them, or advice would you give a new recruiter who's thinking about getting into tech or any other industry? What would be that first skill that you would tell them, here, work on this, get good at this, and you have a shot at making this work?
Yeah, I mean, it's again tied to a lot of what we've talked about. I think it's getting back to basics. Like, I think it's not about being clever with email hacks anymore. It's about being sincere and ready to show up for someone. And, to your point, I think it's true across most markets, but I'm very much specialized in tech, and that's the space I know. And in tech, it's a candidate driven market. And so it's not really about having the opportunities anymore. That the tech folks have more opportunities than they know what to do with. And so I think it's people skills. If you can get in front and meet people and be sincere, and, what do you want to do and how might I be able to help you? Well, I'm really interested in, a lot of the data companies popping up that are using data science to solve, curing cancer, or some of these different, big data meets medicine. Cool. I'm going to go as a recruiter, do some research, see if I can network with some people, make some intros. Maybe I know someone already, but it's people skills. I think it's just being real, getting in front of people. And when I was young, getting into recruiting, I would just ask the developers. I would never. A lot of recruiting training is to bolster and to pretend you're something you're not. And I did the opposite of that. I just was like, hey, I'm young. I have good people skills. I'll kind of handle all the calling around and locating opportunities. You just tell me what you want, and I'll try and kind of take job orders from you, the candidates. Um, but again, I think it was just I wasn't working off a script or doing what an agency, to push for these commissions. I was just trying to learn about, why do most tech people hate recruiters? What can I do to earn a reason to call you back or talk to you again? But again, I think all those things just relate back to being human, having good intentions, and there's reaching out to people. A lot of people won't talk, but a lot of people will, and when they do, if you're real, it'll lead places.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that the more you pay attention to what the candidate or the client for that matter actually wants, and the more you question and ask questions about what they're trying to do, the better your relationship is going to be with them long term. And the better that relationship is, the better you're going to end up being in terms of your position in the marketplace. You're going to have a reputation as somebody that can be trusted and is a valuable resource. And I say it like this, Elliot. I think that candidates get inundated today, regardless of industry, with people who send out crap email that is formatic, that has a couple of, you know, keywords in there. And what ends up happening is they end up giving them the wrong job at the wrong time in the wrong place. And they do that because they have zero relationship with that person, right? So the more you can focus, say to me, the more you can focus on building real relationships, the better. Because you can have 30,000 first level connections. It doesn't mean that they're all engaged with you. That doesn't mean that that's an actual usable network. And so many people today get hung up because of social media and influencers and things like that on how many connections do I have? Well, I'd rather have 100 people who buy from me over and over and over again than have 35,000 who barely even know who I am. They might see a post from me every now and then, but they don't really engage.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And that's, we're moving back into that. It's not all about numbers and what the
Sure.
text says. It's about who answers your calls, who you actually have a meaningful relationship with.
Okay, so now futurist hat, go from CEO to futurist. I want you to think 5 years out from now. How do you see tech recruiting or recruiting in general changing in the next 5 years? And what can a recruiter today do to prepare for those changes that are headed their way?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think we touched on it earlier. I think a lot of the technology that's going to come out is going to be designed specifically to weed out the technology that's been tricking and abusing email and messaging, like all this automation around fake outreach. Like I've talked about this elsewhere, but it's kind of an aggressive statement, but like it's lying in a sense. Like designing these emails. I mean, some companies are worse than others. Like there's a tool I won't name, but they have a feature where you can write email as an engineering leader, as the recruiter, and I'm like, I get the value of that feature, but
Really?
you're literally starting a conversation with a candidate on a lie. And that's a more a more clear example. But even sending template messages that are intended to come off as a genuine one-off email, and so I think a lot of that's going to go away. I think candidates are fed up with it. I think email is going to change and stop allowing so much crap like that to come through. Um, and I really just see, as we get rid of all these tools, it's going to force the recruiting industry to get back to those recruiting fundamentals of actually having relationships, industry knowledge, connections, and that's where recruiting is valuable. Like if you are, back to the example of the startups solving can't the shout out to Tempest in Chicago, but startups like that are using data and solving disease, fighting disease and things like that, being able to locate people that have fought disease or experienced that stuff personally and reach out and connect them with, hey, we're working on stuff, so I think that's where the future is going, is less spam of let me hit 5,000 people and see if I could get 5 or 10 to respond. And I think the next wave is going to be, let's use technology to hit up 15 people, but knowing that these 15 people not only have the hard skills, but they have a lot of soft skills that all signal towards them being, genuinely interested in what we're doing here. And so, yeah, I think it's going to move away from all this, commoditized transactional volume tools, emails, and go back to The recruiting we do, and it's same for the employer brands. We've been seeing this for tech companies for the past 10 years. When I worked at Groupon, DHH would bash Groupon, and it made recruiting very hard. But it was because Groupon recruiters were annoying DHH about Rails positions, and it's this,
Right.
so these bad transactional, lying approaches to recruiting are getting called out in the marketplace. They're reflecting your employer brand. The engineers are all talking, and if you're spamming them and being ingenuine, that's going to be how your brand is represented out there. Whereas if you're, reaching out to a very niche audience with very well researched emails and saying things that are, relevant to them, that's going to reflect on your employee. Hey, we're super deep in this genomics niche, and we're at all the conferences, we're making donations, we're helping developers, we're doing community stuff. Like
Hmm.
that's what recruiting is being specialized and part of something, not hiding behind a computer and LinkedIn and spamming people all day.
Yeah, I couldn't. I love your passion, man. I really do because I agree with you 100%. I think that um, there is when I start, like, there are times when I'll sit down and still actively recruit things. And when I do that, the first thing I do is I look at who is in my network, going back to those old time skills that I learned. Who's in my network that has the skill set that I need, right? And then I talk with them. But I'm also making connections with new people. I don't necessarily send out emails to people. I'll send a connection request. Hey, I just want to talk to you. I want to get to know you. And it starts there. And if they happen to be a fit, great. But generally speaking, that they're not. I'm doing these things in advance of any kind of a defined need, and I'm just building relationships and getting to know people rather than sending them, as you put it, a disingenuous email. Because I think that's, you can see the threads on LinkedIn where people are like, I hate recruiters, I hate recruiters, I hate recruiters. And I tell the recruiters and the agencies and the companies that I talk to, you're doing it to yourself. It's a self-inflicted wound because you're sending messages to people that have no connection with you. And when you do that, it's like going out on the street and trying to sell somebody something to a stranger that you don't know. Hey, I've got this widget, you should buy it. They turn and walk away from you because there's no level of trust in the interaction that they're having with you. Elliot, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate our time today. You're one of those guys that I always get something from every time I talk to you, and I just appreciate you taking some time to join us here today on Talent Unfiltered.
Hey man, right back at you. I always enjoy our chats and really appreciate you having me on today. It was fun chatting with you.
All right, thanks, Elliot. We'll talk to you soon.
Later, man.
All right, that's going to do it for us today. I really want to thank Elliot for joining us. I think his approach to talent and recruiting is something that we all can learn from. Being a human being is the real key to who he is and how he recruited in his past. And my suggestion is to you that you find your own true voice and just go for it. Now, if you want to hear more from Elliot, you can head over to intelligent.com. And his first article for us was called Be Human. It's a great read. I would suggest you go check it out. And you can also look at all the other great articles from all the other thought leaders. Now, if you like what we did here today and you want to stay up to date, then like, subscribe, and share on your platform of choice. Don't forget to turn on the notification buttons so you never miss any new content from us. Until next time, stay safe.